Welcome to another episode of Forge Diaries, still rough, unpolished, and in this case, unfinished. In a previous episode I showed some experiments creating a wolf's tooth pattern. Inspired by Owen Bush, an extremely skilled UK bladesmith, I engaged in a few more experiments. In this episode I show the beginnings of a long sax that will feature this pattern. I start with a 1-inch wide and 1/2 inch thick bar of W1. I mark this bar with a scribe in 3/8 inch intervals. The idea is to make cuts on the bandsaw up to the line I'm scribing here. Cutting steel on the bandsaw takes a long time. To prevent you from getting bored, I'm showing it in 8 times speed. Alright, I'm finally done. Actually, that's a lie. This was just the first pass. I now start over and split the existing cuts in half to get cuts every 3/16 of an inch. As you can see, there are a lot of cuts here. The plan is to create the teeth using wrought iron. However, the wrought iron I have access to is not very well behaved, and I'm strengthening it by mixing in some mild steel. I have wrought iron on the outside and mild steel in the middle. The packet now gets forge welded under very high heats. I fold the whole thing until I get about 21 layers. Now I am forging it out into a very thin bar. So thin that it can fit between the cuts I made previously. The fly press helps to forge the bar to the same width on every hit. I take the bar and clean it up so that there is no scale left. This will help with forge welding later. Since the bandsaw curve is quite small, I take a cutting disc to widen up the cuts a little bit more. I use a punch to deform the cuts at the bottom in the hope that it will give the wrought iron something to grip on. Using a Viking-age inspired hammer made by Jim Austin in Oakland, I slowly fit the wrought iron pieces into the W1. This is a very laborious process that is taking much longer than I would like. Driving in the thin slices of wrought bends the W1, so some additional widening of the cuts is required. Alright, more on this next time, but I have one more project to share. In the following we are making a Viking-age padlock inspired by finds on display at the Jorvik Viking Center. To save time, we won't be historically accurate. In particular, we are using some steel pipe to make faster progress. The lock plates will be held in place by several steel rivets. We are using 1/4 inch square bar to start with. For visual appeal, we are twisting the bars cold. This creates a very irregular twist. We then cut the bar into several 4-inch sections. We will forge tenons on each side of the 4-inch twisted bars. To make it a little bit easier to see where the tenon should start, we mark them on the bandsaw. This small cut is easy to see even when the steel is hot. Forging the tenons actually took most of our time this day. We use a blacksmith helper that is a butcher and square dies. The tenons need to fit through a 3/16 inch hole. We use a somewhat primitive way to set the shoulders, but it works alright. Now it's time to make the shackle for the lock. This starts out with a 1/4 inch round bar. One side is kept flat, as you can see here, and the other side is being tapered into a point. The power hammer, as always, allows us to save a lot of time. Once the basic shape has been established, it's time to bend it into a U. In operation, I always find somewhat challenging. I should have started using scrolling tongues to begin with. The next piece is forming the springs that will keep the shackle in the lock. We use an oxyacetylene torch for welding and brazing. This is very bright, don't look too closely. Now it's time to start working on the plates. We mark the points where we want the rivets to be. To make it easier for the holes to align, we welded the plates together. That's cheating, but it also saves time. Things are sort of fitting together, and we use this face to fine-tune the length of the rivets. The next step is to create the opening in the lock through which the shackle enters. This requires some time-intensive file work, but also makes for a pretty close fit. Now we can also fine-tune the springs to make sure they really lock safely. While it would have been nice to be able to completely finish the padlock, that will have to wait till next time. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to see more, subscribe to my channel.